So in this video, we're going to start programming. We're going to talk about variables today. We've got 7 variables that we're going to discuss. They're kind of the beginning variables. So I'm using Wing, but you can use whatever IDE you want for Python. But we're going to create a new project, and we're going to start programming. So the first, so we're going to discuss a few things. So use a hashtag for comments. We're going to go through strings, integers, float, list, tuple, dictionary, and then a boolean. Lists are also sometimes referred to as arrays, but in this we'll just discuss them as lists. It's a little bit easier. In Python, they're more commonly referred to as a list. So string. So to create a variable, you basically just type a variable name, and that equals variable value. I'm going to comment this out. This is kind of a good guideline for variables. So for instance, if we want a string, so Python's really easy in that it automatically detects the variable. It uses whatever variable it thinks there should be. So if we want to do a string, let's name it string var for variable equals, and then this is a string, and we use quotes for strings. So now that variable is created. And if we want to test it, we can print the variable, which is so print string var, and then you hit the little play button. I'm gonna have to save this file, and let's go to desktop or documents, sorry, and then Python development. We'll create a new one for videos, and this is going to be variables. One thing to note really quick, when you're naming variables or Python files, if you want to use a space, if you want spaces between words and stuff, use an underscore instead. If you use a space and then you try to go and compile a Python code in the command prompt or terminal, it'll cause some problems. So use an underscore like this, or you can just leave it at variables, or variable is what we're going to do. So now it runs and it prints out this is a string. So that's the output of this. But we're going to get rid of that. Okay. For an integer, so strings are literally a string of words. It could be phrases, basically anything inside of quotes. So if you put this is a string 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, blah blah blah. It didn't go all the way. It's still a string. You can put a decimal in there. It's still a string. One thing about strings, backslashes you can't use. It's an escape character in Python. So if you do a backslash n, that tells it to create a new line. So anything after that is going to be on a new line. So this is on a new line. So if we play that, and I don't want that to keep popping up. Oh, we gotta print that first. So stuff like this, it's really helpful to have actually like Jupyter or some of those other ones, or Python idle, because you can type it in and it'll automatically do it. And Wing, I use this more for bigger programs, and so it's more for typing a big chunk of code and then testing it. But as you can see, our string, which is one line right here, prints out as 2 lines down here, and it's separated by this backslash n. So it doesn't actually show that, but it uses that to basically hit the enter key on your keyboard. So there's that. We'll go into strings a lot more later on, but that's all you need to know for now. Integers. So this is an int variable. It's literally just type a number, 51. That's an integer. Integers are whole numbers without a decimal. If you want a decimal, that is a float. Float variable equals 51.0 or 51.2, whatever you want. Those are integers and floats. So integer is just the whole number. The float is an integer with a decimal. Easy way to remember that. Then we have a list. So lists use brackets like these guys, and inside of these you put items. So you could do strings. So this is a string inside of a list. You can add numbers in there, 53. You can add floats, 56.4. You can do variable values, so you could say, let's put the float variable in here. Let's put int variable. Let's put the string variable. You can do all kinds of stuff. And then if you print out a list, it'll print it out exactly like it looks right there. So we play, and boom, it looks exactly like it is, except it replaces the variable names with the variable value. So that's a list. Lists can be changed. We'll have a video on lists by themselves. You can add to a list. You can remove from a list. You can print out just one item or multiple items. There's all kinds of stuff. So lists are really beneficial and helpful. A tuple is another form of a list, but they can't be changed. They use just regular parentheses. And we're just going to copy and paste our list variable into there. That's a tuple. Boom. You can do anything you want in there. However, so with a tuple, what I mean by it can't be changed is in the program. So on a list, I'll show you really quick. You can do list.append, which adds a value to the list. Tuples you can't change. So you set a tuple. Tuples are really helpful for lists that are going to be used throughout the program but don't need to change, such as if you have like an IP address, an email address, or settings that you don't want to be changed throughout the program. You just create a tuple, and that works. I don't use tuples as often because they're not super necessary. I tend to use lists because I like to change things. Dictionaries are really helpful. They're a little bit different. Dictionary variable. These are going to use little brackets, the little curly brackets. And the way these work is you're going to have a key and a value. I'm going to add a comment here. Dictionary equals key, colon, value. And so what happens with a dictionary is you can look up the key and it'll return the value. So it's kind of like a variable inside of a dictionary. These are actually really helpful in a lot of cases. Say you want to store settings, or if you want a lock and key type thing, a username, password, multiple variables, especially as things get big. Instead of having to look up, so with a list, you have to look up each value based on its index. So this is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With a dictionary, if we have key, and we use strings for this part, value, all I have to do is look up key in the dictionary, and it'll return value. So for instance, we can do username equals say Tim, and password. Please note this is not a secure way of doing username and password, so don't copy this. This is simply for an example. Password is my password. Stuff like this. So with a dictionary, I can look up, okay, what's the username, and it'll return Tim. What's the password? It'll return my password. And you can also do a list. So you can say, what's the password? What are all the passwords I have? If you have a list right here, it'll return the entire list. And then Boolean is the last one. It's really simple. It is literally, I said that weird. Create a comment right here. It's true or false. It's yes or no, true or false. And this is not going to let me type a capital F. So I'll do it this way. So Boolean equals false. You have to use a capital F or a capital T, otherwise it won't read it. So false doesn't work, but capital F does. True works. You can see it's blue, but true, the lowercase, doesn't work. So Boolean has to be true or false. It's yes or no. It's like a true or false question on a quiz. It's either yes or it's no. It cannot be anything else. But these are used quite often as well. So that's all the variables we're going to go through today. We have strings, integers, floats, lists, tuples, dictionaries, and booleans. We'll go into some of these a lot more later on. Like we'll have a video for lists, we'll have a video for dictionaries, we'll have a video for strings. So stay tuned. That's all we've got for today.